Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Walker. I'm the manager of athlete development here at USAV. Today, I'm joined by Shawn Hueglin, who is a senior sports dietitian for the USOPC, and she works pretty extensively with our USA volleyball team here as well. So, Shawn joins me today to talk a little bit about what young athletes should be thinking about when we're considering supplementation for our diets in training and performance. Thanks for joining us, Shawn.
Yeah, thanks, Lauren, for having me.
So, to open up a little bit here, a lot of young athletes express interest in supplementation, but they don't necessarily know what is appropriate based off of their own nutritional or training needs when they're young and in the middle of maturation. So, can you give us a little bit of an overview of what you've seen in terms of what young athletes are interested in when it comes to supplementation or understanding their nutritional needs?
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of times I like to start to think about supplementation and ask some questions, of course. And trying to understand, I think, first is how old is the athlete? And so, where are they in that maturational process? And I also like to understand kind of what is the volume of volleyball and outside activity are they doing as well? Is this one team? Are we playing on multiple teams throughout the year? Do we have breaks and things like that? The other part of that, I think, is sort of like, exploring like what's the curiosity around, what are we trying to achieve here? And how are you hoping that this might benefit you? And so I think, of course, there's a sort of mantra around supplements is like food first. And so, before we go supplementing our diet, let's think about that we have all the basics covered. And so lots of times you might imagine a pyramid where we have the basics as our carbohydrate, fats, protein, fluid, sleep, and all those things are being taken care of. What's happening with some of those then smaller nutrients that we might look at, vitamins and minerals? Are all of those main meals and snacks covering those types of things? And is the amount appropriate for what you're doing right now and what you're trying to achieve? So I think, not to sound sort of boring but the basics I think are really important, because taking a supplement, for example, like creatine, on top of a really poor diet probably isn't going to do very much, not going to be very effective. Taking that on top of a really great diet probably could benefit some athletes. So I think there's some sort of levels that we would go through to sort of discover that. And I definitely don't think it's a one size fits all approach. And that's really hard in team sports, because if one teammate is doing something, then lots of times other teammates are like, oh, let's try this or let's try that. And it might, be really effective for one, but not another. So that's where I would start.
I love that you start there, because I do think a lot of our young athletes might be influenced exactly by what you were just saying, what a teammate is doing, what a competitor, what a friend is doing, and not think first about their own diet. And that's a great place, like you said, for us to start and advise those young athletes to start, because of the fact that they're still growing and maturing. So how does that growth and maturation influence how our body is actually using nutrients?
Yeah, I think that's great. So, first of all, we want to make sure that the body's getting enough nutrients for any of those systems and organs and tissues in the body to grow on their natural course. So that's going to be our bone and our muscle and our tendons, our ligaments, our brain, and, everything beyond that as well. And so we want to make sure we have enough nutrients for that. And eating a variety of foods should cover all of that growth and development, I would say. Where I think then supplements come into place is there a deficiency that we're not able to meet through food? And has that been determined by a professional versus self-diagnosed, or maybe parent diagnosed? And so kind of how are we determining that maybe we're not getting enough of something? Is there potentially a physician involved? And have we done any blood work to identify anything that could be detected there as well? So kind of systematically going through a process there. And also, I think just looking at patterns, does an athlete get sick often? Have they had multiple injuries? What type of injuries are they? Have there been any bone injuries? Have there been things that we can sort of look at over time and say, well, maybe we're interested in some of our vitamins and minerals that we're not getting enough in. Maybe we have a really picky eater, and maybe when they go on tournaments, they get really nervous and they don't eat very much. And, kind of start to understand sort of what does this dynamic look like. So I think that making sure that growth and development is taken care of, and then certainly what that training load looks like, and are we getting in nutrients? Do we have multiple sessions a day? How are we going from school into training, or do we have early morning sessions? And like, how do we set the day up to make sure that we have enough nutrients at the time that we need those nutrients to be available?
I love the consideration there too, in thinking with our youth athletes versus national team athletes that you often work with. Those are very different schedules. So thinking about the timing of nutrition is really important consideration in all of this too, even before you consider anything like a supplementation. Um, but I love too that you emphasized for our athletes, and I hope they hear this message. This should be a process if you choose to engage with supplements that is dictated and kind of guided by experts.
Yep.
Determining that you actually have that need and then figuring out what the need is that you actually need to supplement your diet with. So, as you think about young athletes who may be feeling on the court that they're not playing their best, who might be interested in saying, hey, maybe I need to have my diet evaluated or think about this, where would you send them with our average youth athlete?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think, the first place might be a sports medicine doc. And because a physician that might be different than your primary care physician or your pediatrician could have those resources and also understand the family resources probably to say, we could refer you to somebody and there could be some type of consult. I think that there is information certainly out there on the internet that could be beneficial. I think that like teamusa.org, we have a section on nutrition there that we have a lot of different like handouts and fact sheets and things like that. Now, is the adolescent athlete going to be really engaged in something like that? Maybe not, but I do think it could be where a parent and a athlete could get together and say, hey, let's look at some of these resources, and then how do we get referred from there? And so I think it could be talking to a professional. It could be talking to their coach as well and asking their coach if they have any resources, for sure. And there are some places like Gatorade Sport Science has an institute. They have a lot of nice resources there as well, and some of them are athlete friendly, I would say. I think the other part of that could be is just kind of like paying attention to what we're eating, right? Are we eating 3 meals a day? Do we have some snacks included in there? Do we have some color on our plate? And what does this look like? And maybe what are a couple areas that we could pay attention to? So I think that the other part of supplements is that there are different types of supplements. And so some that you might consider as a dietary supplement could supplement being your vitamins and minerals and something like that. That could be a vitamin D, it could be a calcium, it could be, a range of omegas or things like that, magnesium, lots of things out there. And then we have what we might call our ergogenic aids, or those that would be enhancing performance. And a little bit different categories to me there also. So you might think of things like creatine, caffeine, maybe added protein powder, branched chain amino acids, like different things like that, that all could be appropriate for a young athlete depending on the age and their goals and kind of where they're coming from. But again, just very different purposes. So feeling low in energy on the court, not performing my best, starting with food, right? Are we getting enough nutrients? And then are we getting enough of the nutrients that we might need for some of these, systems that we're taxing? And then if we're feeling pretty good energy-wise and we're getting enough sleep and things like that, do I want to try to step this up a little bit? Do I want to try to add something else in there that could be beneficial? And that's when I think you might go to those other categories. And again, that might be the level that we're playing, and what are we trying to achieve here? Because I think there's a lot out there, and probably just keeping in mind that the internet can be a wealth of resources, but it also can be overwhelming. And there's no regulation on anything that's on the internet. So anybody can put out there that like this supplement is good for volleyball players, and it could have a lot of evidence behind it or it could have none. And that is unfortunately not really regulated very well. So you might go to the internet for advice or asking questions. And I think that especially with AI right now, to always kind of check where is that summary coming from. There's always a little link there. And you might be surprised at where that intelligence is gathering information from. And it may have nothing to do with nutrition or nobody who's an expert in nutrition. So something just to probably be aware of.
That's a really great thing for our young athletes to be paying attention to, is where does the information about any sort of supplement come from? What are some maybe precautions you would advise them about when it comes to, let's say they want to add a protein supplement or a creatine supplement? What would you kind of red flag for them, or precautions that you would have when looking into some sort of supplement?
Yep, great question. It's a bit of the wild, wild west out there with supplements, and you can get a whole variety depending on where you go. I think that one is, when you look at the ingredients, make sure that the primary ingredients that you're interested in is that protein, is that creatine, is that caffeine, is that an amino acid, is that what is on the label, and primarily what's on the label. So there's a lot of supplements that have many, many other ingredients in there, and it's probably hard to tell then, is there enough of the primary ingredient that you actually want to have as a beneficial effect? And sometimes it's easy to throw other things in there because it looks like it could be a great product and you're achieving all these different things, but maybe there's not enough of anything in there to do anything at that point. So the ingredient label might be helpful. The other aspect is that sometimes there's a bunch of ingredients lumped together, and it's like copyrighted. And so they don't actually disclose how much of different things are in there. And so I think that's important to be aware of as well, is if it says that it's like, I don't know, protein conglomerates, and it has all these things listed under there, but it doesn't really tell you actually how much protein in grams of protein are in there, then I think that that's something to be aware of. Usually when there are claims on a label that sound like they're amazing, they're probably not true. So as unfortunate that is, I don't think there's a lot of magic pills out there. I think there are some really good supplements that, if implemented in the correct dose and the correct timing, can have a really good effect. But there's probably nothing that's magically going to change your performance overnight.
I love the practicality of your recommendations, Shawn, right? Thinking about what is the performance that you want on the court, looking at that nutritional intake on the whole first, getting some expert opinions, and then at the end of the day, reminding yourself there's no magic pill, right? So everything that we do in our progression of ourselves physiologically, whether it's nutritionally or physiologically out on and court training, all comes back to consistency and small steps, right? And I like the practical recommendations that we've ended up here. So as we wrap up this topic, are there any other pieces of advice that you would give young athletes to think about when it comes to their nutritional intake as well as their progression in sport?
Yeah, I think, as early as you can, just start paying attention, right? And start learning how your body responds to different things, and know that you are an individual always. And that it's really fun to kind of see, like, what are the pros doing, and what supplements are they taking, or how are they eating? And there's lots of fun stuff on social media to follow out there. But keep in mind that you're probably at a pretty different level than they are at this point. And so I think putting in the hard work on the court is the mainstay, right, of getting better as an athlete. And then all these different pieces around it is figuring out, like, oh, if I have a little more carbohydrate, how do I feel on the court? Does that feel good for my brain? Does that feel good for my energy? Oh, maybe that felt like a little bit too much, or maybe that felt like a great amount. But you can play around with so many different things and almost use yourself as a little experiment. And I think the more kind of curious you get to try different things out and to see if there's a way to tell how your body is responding to that. And also to be patient, give it some time. Something that you do one time, you may not notice, but something that you do every day consistently over 3 to 4 weeks of time, you might start to see, oh, that's interesting. This is how I'm feeling. So I think that a lot of things take time, so you need a little bit of patience. Consistency is really important with any, I think, nutrition change. And so if we're going to implement something, the consistency every day is when the body says, oh, okay, I'm gonna like choose to respond to this now. But if you do something one day but don't do it the next and do it the next and not for 2 days, and there's a lot of inconsistency, which is challenging for adolescents. They don't always have everyday consistent lives. And so I think, but those are things you can control as well. And I think that's the other probably last part, as I would say, is that nutrition, hydration, recovery, all these things are under your control for the most part. And so you get to choose, with probably some parental say and some coach timing and some different things like that. But in general, you get to say like what you put in your body. So, the more that you make great choices, the more that your body's going to respond. And I think rewards you for that.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for sharing your insight and expertise with our athletes and our coaches.
Yeah. Thanks, Shawn. Yeah.